Look, I've never been much into superstition, you know? I always saw horror movies as a big joke and thought it was all nonsense. But after that night, I can no longer deny that there are things that are beyond our comprehension. I'm going to tell you what happened to me and Felipe, my husband. I hope you understand why this changed everything. We had just gotten married and the idea was a simple trip with no specific destination. That day it was already late and we were both exhausted from all the driving. That's when we saw a motel on the side of the highway with a slowly blinking sign, Hospitaria Noite Serena. It looked almost abandoned, but the building was still standing. A thin man, Mr. Valverde, appeared out of nowhere. He had a strange manner, spoke little but observed a lot. With a smile that seemed more like a grimace, he said, "Choose any room except 13. It's closed." At that moment, Felipe gave that laugh I know well, of someone who is already thinking of something crazy. And why not 13? The old man's expression became somber. He just muttered, "Renovation." But the way he said it seemed to indicate something more than that. We ended up getting room 12, right next to 13. The place was precarious, with an old bed, a musty smell, an outdated TV. But it would be enough to rest, or at least that's what I thought. It must have been almost midnight when I heard some strange noises, like shuffling footsteps. I thought it was Felipe going to the bathroom, but he was still lying next to me. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He just mumbled, "Must be another guest," and went back to sleep. I couldn't sleep a wink. The footsteps continued now down the hallway, and then suddenly there was a dull knock, as if something heavy had been thrown against the door. My heart raced. Felipe, still a little groggy, got up irritated. "I'm going to see what's going on." He opened the door, but the hallway was empty, just silence and a strange smell, as if something burned was mixed with rusty iron. I went back to bed, but I couldn't calm down. That's when I noticed something on the floor, a small, crumpled piece of paper, partially hidden under the carpet. I picked it up and almost threw it away. It seemed so silly. But there was a warning written on it. "Don't trust them. Run away." I showed it to Felipe, who laughed, thinking it was a prank. A bad movie. They're trying to scare us. I wanted to believe him, but something didn't add up, and the feeling that something terrible was lurking around us only got worse. Even with Felipe's jokes, I couldn't forget that crumpled notice. Who could have left that, and why? The motel was already bizarre, but now it seemed really dangerous to me. Felipe, being who he is, couldn't help himself. He insisted on peeking into room 13. I bet the old man doesn't want us there for some obscure reason. Let's take a look. "Are you crazy, Felipe? What if Mr. Valverde catches us snooping around?" "Oh, come on, he won't even know." Even though I was scared to death, I went after him. Being alone in the room was even worse. We crossed the dimly lit hallway and stopped in front of the door to room 13. Felipe tried to turn the locked doorknob. He gave me a defiant smile and whispered, "Wait here, I'll get the key." Before I could protest, I saw him disappearing toward the reception. I stood there, alone, trying to control my breathing. Something in that hallway was strange. It wasn't just the silence. It was as if the air was suffocatingly heavy and an invisible presence was watching me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. But it was Felipe returning, all happy with the key in his hand. "Did you think I was going to leave you alone forever? Relax, it's just an old room." As soon as he turned the lock, I smelled it. A mix of rotten meat and mold. The room was a mess. Broken furniture, sinister stains on the walls, and the floor didn't look like dust, but something sticky. "Let's get out of here, Felipe. This is very wrong." "Calm down, Lara. Look at this." He pointed to a trunk in the corner, locked with a rusty padlock. He knelt down to rummage through it, but I grabbed his arm. "Leave it alone, let's go." He was reluctant, but agreed. As we left, I had the feeling I saw something in the bedroom mirror, a shadow that passed quickly behind me. I tried to pretend I didn't see it, but a shiver ran through me until we got back to room 12. There, Felipe couldn't get what he had seen out of his head. I bet that trunk holds some proof of why this room is off limits. Haven't you had enough? It smells like death in there, Felipe. Don't get involved in this anymore. He was about to retort, but was interrupted when he found something at the back of the wardrobe, an album of old photos. It was huge, with a heavy leather cover. When I opened it, I felt my hair stand on end. Photos of several people, probably guests, but most of them had their faces shaved or burned. At that exact moment, we heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The bedroom door opened violently, and Mr. Valverde stood there, panting, eyes wide. "You've messed with things you shouldn't have. Get out of here now." "What's this story?" Felipe insisted, his voice trying to sound calm but shaking slightly. "What's in room 13? Who are those people in these photos?" The old man stared at me, then looked at him, speaking almost in a whisper. "This isn't just a motel. And room 13 is where it all started." My spine froze. "What started?" After those words, I froze. "Murders," I repeated. It was as if I didn't want to believe it. Mr. Valverde lowered his head, his shoulders slumped as if he were carrying an immense burden. He sighed before telling me, "Years ago, a man used room 13 for cruel acts. People would disappear and be buried in the back. When they found out, it was too late. The place never recovered. Felipe didn't take it very seriously. Okay, it's nice to scare kids, but we're not kids." "What are you hiding in that trunk?" The old man tried to stop him, but Felipe grabbed the trunk key he had dropped in the confusion and ran to room 13. "Felipe, don't do that!" I shouted, but he didn't listen. The old man shouted after me, "If he opens that trunk, no one gets out alive." I ran, but when I got to room 13, Felipe was already kneeling, the trunk open. The smell was horrible, like something decomposing. Inside were blood-stained clothes, papers with names written on them, and bones, small, scary pieces. Felipe was pale, holding an old diary. He read it out loud, each sentence making my heart beat faster. "The murderer's diary?" I whispered. The pages described atrocities. The victims were unsuspecting guests. The worst was the last message. "My legacy continues. The motel needs sacrifices." Before we could understand, we heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Mr. Valverde, but this time armed with a shotgun. "You shouldn't have moved. I tried to warn you." "It's too late now." He no longer asked us to leave. He spoke with a calmness that made everything even more frightening. "Did you know about all this?" Felipe asked, the diary still in his hand. "I knew. I had to keep the place safe so that no one else would suffer. But you shouldn't have opened the trunk. Then everything got out of control." Felipe tried to argue. The old man pointed the gun. "Put that diary down and get lost. Now." But Felipe didn't let go. He stepped forward to take the gun from him, and they fought. I just screamed, unable to do anything, until a shot echoed through the room. For a second, I was sure I had lost Felipe. But the one who fell, clutching his shoulder, was Mr. Valverde, wounded but alive. Felipe grabbed my hand and shot out of there. We got in the car and drove away without looking back. Only when we were far away, still panting, did he reveal, "I brought the diary." The next few days turned into a nightmare. We turned the diary over to the police. They found bodies buried in the back, exactly as described. The old man was arrested, but he refused to talk. He didn't say anything about the original killer or why he continued to keep the place open. To this day, I don't know for sure what happened. All I know is that when I close my eyes, I smell something rotting and the presence of room 13. I don't know if it was luck or fate, but we narrowly escaped. If you ever pass a strange motel with a flashing sign and a strange clerk, think twice before going in. No matter how tired you are, you never imagine what might be behind a locked door. Music. I don't even know where to start, but I'll try. It's been a while since this happened, and I still can't sleep well. It was supposed to be just one night, a stopover on the way, but it turned into the worst nightmare of my life. And the worst part is that I'll never look at a hostel the same way again. Letitia and I were coming back from a party in the countryside. It was that phase when everything seems like fun, light-hearted, with plans and laughter. We left late, the road was dark, and as usual the car started to stall. When it stopped completely, there wasn't much we could do. We laughed, but with butterflies in our stomach. We walked for about 20 minutes until we saw a slightly wobbly sign with a blinking light. Estancia Aurora. Letitia joked, "I can just see the horror story we'll tell in the future." I laughed, but the sign had something strange about it, as if it said, "Do not enter." At the reception, the man on duty seemed bothered by our arrival. His eyes were restless and his hands were shaking. "Are you sure you're going to stay? There's another city a little far away," but we had no choice. We took room 203. We went up the stairs, and when we opened the door, a slightly metallic smell enveloped us. Letitia, always joking, said, "It looks like a scene from a horror movie, huh?" I laughed, but I could feel the atmosphere getting heavy. Double bed, small closet, old bathroom. Nothing special, but it seemed wrong. When Letitia went to take a shower, she shouted, "Come here now." The water wasn't normal. It came out cloudy and smelled strongly of metal, almost like iron or blood. I tried to calm her down, saying that there must be a problem with the plumbing, but deep down I was also worried. She got out of the shower quietly, which was rare. We lay down, determined to leave first thing in the morning. But I couldn't sleep. There was a heavy silence, more like a buzzing. Then I heard a faint sound, a murmur. I thought I was imagining it, but it happened again. I got up, walked over to the sink, put my ear to the pipe, and my God, there really was a weak, muffled voice, as if someone was trapped there. I jumped back into bed, unable to explain it. In the morning, I went to complain to the receptionist about the water and the noise. He turned pale. "It's just old pipes. I'm going to call a plumber." Letitia pulled me. "Let's get out of here, please." But I wanted answers. The plumber arrived, an elderly man, and began to dismantle the sink. At one point, he paused, holding something slimy and dark. This isn't ordinary dirt. It was almost mud mixed with blood. He said he would need to check the water tank. We went to a poorly lit hallway. With each step, the smell grew more intense. When we opened the lid of the tank, the horror revealed itself, a woman's body, bloated, decomposing in the water that supplied the motel. The plumber only whispered something along the lines of, "I knew this would be a problem." We called the police, and the manager was arrested within a few hours, confessing to the crime. He hid the body there, believing that no one would notice. Letitia went into shock. She could barely get near water without feeling nauseous. I tried to be strong, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that body and smelled that odor. Since then, whenever I heard someone talk about a motel, I relive it all. If I've learned anything, it's that if you feel something is wrong, trust that. It may be your only chance to save yourself. Music. If I had known what I was getting myself into, I would have preferred to stay at the bus station, sleeping on a hard bench, rather than take the risk. But I was too tired to think straight, so I accepted the ride. The rain was falling heavily on the road, and the truck driver, who introduced himself as Alvaro, seemed friendly. He talked non-stop about the country's highways, but I just wanted to get home. The storm got worse, and he suggested we stop somewhere to sleep. It was either that or spend the night inside the truck. Hospedaria Sombra e Chuva, read the flashing sign. The place looked abandoned, but Alvaro assured me it was quiet. At the reception, we were greeted by Maurilio, the manager. He smiled strangely without any real friendliness and looked at me as if he was evaluating something. It gave me the creeps, but I took the key and went to the room. It was simple, even clean. The bed creaked, the old tube TV showed only static, and the walls were a yellowish color, stained by the years. I tried to sleep, but I had a bizarre thought. It seemed like the place was waiting for me. A noise woke me up, something heavy being dragged along the hallway. It could have been a guest, but the hotel was empty, according to Maurilio. I got up and opened the door a crack. The hallway was dimly lit, the lights flickering. I didn't see anything, but I swear I heard a whisper coming from one of the rooms. I went back to bed with my heart racing, then slow footsteps, getting closer and closer, and then they stopped right in front of my room. I stopped breathing. I waited for a while until the footsteps moved away towards the reception. I went to the window. Outside, a silhouette stared at me in the parking lot, tall and skeletal. I blinked, and the figure disappeared. I couldn't sleep. I felt like there was something alive in that place, something that knew I was there. The next morning, Alvaro had left without warning. Maurilio was cleaning the counter, asking if I had slept well with that fake smile. At one point, he got distracted, and I noticed an open ledger. Each name had a note. Gone. Disappeared. Basement. Then a sheet of paper fell out with a scribbled map and the word, "Be careful." My stomach churned, but I needed to know. I waited for the reception area to clear out and followed the map to a door in the back. It was locked, but the key hung on a hook nearby. I opened it, and a nauseating smell enveloped me. I went down a narrow staircase, the air getting heavier with each step, until I reached a macabre basement. Clothes, suitcases, personal belongings covered in dust, and in the corner, a pile of bones. My eyes could hardly believe it. An old photo showed Maurilio and a few other people, all with icy smiles. The caption, "The Guardians of the Shadow." That was when I heard footsteps coming down. I hid behind a bookshelf. Maurilio appeared with two tall, thin men who were muttering in a strange language. "She knows," Maurilio said. My heart stopped. I was being hunted. I stood still while they searched for me. "The place demands a sacrifice. She can't leave." Trembling, I threw a metal bar in another direction, diverting their attention. I ran upstairs, but the motel had changed. Crooked hallways, stained walls, everything trapped me. I found an open door, locked myself inside, and saw a trapdoor in the floor. I opened it and went down, hoping it led somewhere outside. The tunnel was narrow and dark. I felt invisible hands touching me, whispering. I ran until I saw a light. I emerged in a vacant lot, almost falling to my knees. But back there, Maurilio spotted me. Then a truck appeared, the same one as Alvaro's. I panicked, but I had no choice. I ran to him, screaming for help. He let me climb in, asking what happened. When I tried to explain, he just smiled. I noticed a pendant around his neck, the same symbol from the photo in the basement. "You never left that motel," he said, and everything went black. The last thing I saw was the "Shadow and Rain Inn" sign disappearing in the rearview mirror. Music. If I had known what I was about to get into, I would have ignored that email. But I'm a journalist, and curiosity always trumps fear. The subject line, "Do you want the truth?" The message was dry. "Women disappear in cheap inns. Nobody cares. I know who. Meet me at Afonso's bar at 8 p.m. signed M." There was no sender, just that warning. I wondered if it was worth the risk. Cheap motels, missing people. Something told me there was more to it. I went to Afonso's bar at the agreed time. It was run down, smelling of stale cigarettes and grease. A man in the back waved me over. He seemed anxious, and he placed an envelope in front of me. "Here's everything you need, but it's dangerous. Some truths shouldn't be discovered." I left feeling a sense of foreboding. The envelope seemed to weigh a ton. At home, I opened it. Photos of smiling young women, newspaper clippings about disappearances, and many disappearances occurred at the Star Garden. One photo in particular gave me goosebumps. Larissa, 28 years old, missing. Last seen entering this motel, The next day I went there. The facade was shattered, the sign was faded, and a gate creaked loudly. I asked for a room, pretending to be just another guest. The attendant gave me the key without asking for identification. The room was depressing, but what caught my attention was scratches on the wall near the bed. I got closer and saw that they were symbols, probably made with some sharp object. In the corner, I found a white handkerchief with the initials EV. While I was examining it, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I hid. A shadow stopped in front of the door, as if listening to me. Seconds later, it left. I fled that place, taking the handkerchief. I searched through public archives. I found old cases, murders with strange marks. The suspect never found. Witnesses spoke of a man with a pocket watch, a long chain. I went back to an acquaintance who loved urban legends. He told me about a cursed object, a cursed watch that demanded blood from its victims. There was only one survivor to confirm this, Jandira. She said she escaped after hitting the man with a bottle and running. But the watch, it haunts me in my dreams, she whispered, trembling. Every cheap motel I investigated had reports of missing guests and a mysterious man with a watch. So I decided to set up a bait. I went back to Jardim Estela, pretending to be an easy victim. He appeared with the watch. The air became heavy. At the time of the attack, I managed to grab the watch and run. I discovered that the cursed person was a betrayed man who, with his last breath, cast the curse on the object. To destroy it, I performed a risky ritual. He came after me, but in the end he disappeared, along with the evil that surrounded him. Is it all over? I'm not so sure. Music. I was never afraid of these stories about haunted places. I always thought they were just made up to scare people and sell movies. But that changed completely after what I experienced. My name is Mariana, and this story isn't just about terror. It's a warning. I'm a photographer, and I travel around the countryside in search of interesting places. I drove all day and was exhausted when I found the Pension Labirinto. It looked normal from the outside, but when I walked in, what I felt was anything but cozy. The reception was empty. The smell of mold permeated the walls. I rang the doorbell. After a few minutes, a short man appeared with a misplaced smile. He gave me the key to room 27 without asking for any identification. Strange, but I just wanted to sleep. The room had dark decor, a tiny window and still air. The silence there weighed more heavily than any noise. I tried to ignore it and turned off the light, but soon I heard footsteps, which stopped right in front of my door. I froze in bed. When I plucked up the courage to look through the peephole, nothing, but I kept hearing it. In the morning, I mentioned it to the receptionist. He gave me a strange smile. Everyone here is restless. I decided to explore. The place had confusing hallways, locked doors, and on one of them, deep scratches. I put my ear to it and heard a murmur, but the receptionist interrupted me again, looking at me. I went back to the room and had a horrible nightmare. I saw a man in a white coat laughing while chasing people with medical instruments. I woke up sweating, my arm hurting as if someone had injected me with something. I searched the room, and under the bed I found a diary. It belonged to someone who called himself the Doctor. He performed cruel experiments with fear and pain. He said that the entire building had secret passages. I went to the hallway, took a picture off the wall, and behind it there was indeed a hidden door. I went down a staircase and found rusty surgical tables, bloodstains, and photos of missing people. I heard footsteps. I turned off the flashlight and hid. A masked figure appeared. It seemed to be looking for me. When it left, I tried to run away, but I got lost in the hallways that seemed to move on their own. Luckily, I found 3 people chained up. They helped me find the exit, but the figure followed us, laughing maniacally. We reached the emergency exit, but someone needed to hold it back. Without thinking, I turned on it, using a piece of iron. It was brutal, but I managed to knock it down enough to escape. When we left, the sun was rising. and the Labyrinto pension seemed harmless. We called the police, but when they went, they found nothing. It was as if the place had never existed. To this day, I wake up at night hearing that suffocating laughter. Places like these hide, waiting for their next prey. Music. I used to laugh at legends about cursed inns. I thought they were nonsense. My friend Ricardo, however, had the excellent idea of visiting the Pension da Quimera, known for room 13, where no one would leave alive. Nina and Tiago agreed. The majority won, and I went along, reluctantly. We arrived at the building early in the evening, on a narrow road surrounded by tall trees. When we saw the building, everyone went silent. It looked like a soulless shell, broken windows staring at us like empty eyes. We entered with flashlights. The musty smell almost made me give up, but Ricardo started recording everything. We found an old notebook under a bed full of cobwebs. It belonged to Herminio, the original owner of the place. He referred to room 13 as the Boca da Quimera and described horrific events. I wanted to leave immediately, but Ricardo said we came through room 13. So we got to the door. The number was violently scratched out. As soon as we entered, I smelled something burning mixed with blood. Scratched walls, the corner with a rusty safe. Nina noticed that those scratches looked like fingernail marks. When I ran my hand over it, I felt as if the wall was alive. It was then that an old radio started playing, a distorted, terrible melody. Ricardo went to the safe, and it clicked as he opened it. He found old letters and photos. The letters told of guests who never left, and the photos showed terrified people in bed with a shadow behind them. Suddenly, the walls seemed to move, and I heard a groan coming from the ceiling. When I pointed the flashlight, a dark stain oozed, taking shape. "There's something here!" Tiago yelled, but he didn't need to say it. We could all see the shadow advancing. Ricardo shouted, "In the diary, it says there's a basement." He pulled back the carpet. We found a trap door and went down. The basement smelled of rot, and there was a circle drawn on the floor. "Herminio made a pact," whispered Ricardo, copying symbols from the diary. Then the shadow descended too, no longer just an image, but something hideous and contorted. I tried to help, but Tiago held me back. All I heard was Ricardo shouting something in Latin. The shadow swallowed him. We ran back and left the building at dawn without him. Without exchanging a word, we got in the car and disappeared. Weeks later, I found Ricardo's camera. The last image is of him looking into the lens with a smile that wasn't his eyes empty. If you're thinking of entering the Chimera pension, remember, it's not just a legend, it's real, and it's waiting. Music. I never believed in stories about cursed buildings, but after what I experienced, I changed my mind. My name is Henrique, and I work traveling to sell goods. I spend most of my time on the road. It was always peaceful, until that fateful night on the BR-46. The road was deserted, and I was exhausted when I saw the sign for Posada Estrella Esquecida. There was no other option. It looked old, but I needed a bed. Inside, everything was strange. A hallway lit by dim lights. The receptionist, Martin, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening. You're the only one here today," he said. I went up to room 7 with my back aching, dreaming of sleeping. The bed was hard, the furniture old, but I had no choice. I tried to sleep, but I woke up in the middle of the night to footsteps in the hallway. I got up and looked through the peephole. No one. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard whispers, low voices right next to my door. Fear froze me. I grabbed my cell phone and turned on the flashlight, but I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed something strange in the wall. A small hole, the size of a finger. It looked like an observation point. I got goosebumps from head to toe. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, but I couldn't sleep anymore. In the morning, I left the room determined to leave. It was then that I saw, lying on the floor in the hallway, an old key with the number 13 on it. But I knew that there was no room 13 in that building, or so they said. I looked at the end of the hallway and there was a door with no number, almost hidden. My curiosity got the better of me. I fitted the key and the door opened with a horrible creak. The smell inside was indescribable, old blood, mold. The walls were stained with dark stains, and in the middle was a trunk. On the floor were piles of newspaper clippings about people who had disappeared on the BR-46. In a corner, I found a leather diary with the name Martim written on it. The first few entries were banal, but later he talked about cleaning up the road, getting rid of the scum. He described how he chose his victims. Lone travelers who no one would notice were missing. My fingers trembled as I realized I was on the list. That was when I heard a noise in the hallway. I turned off the light, closed the diary, and held my breath. The footsteps stopped outside. I turned the doorknob and ran, diary in hand. In the hall, I tried to open the main door, but it was locked. Behind me, Martim's voice. "You found something you shouldn't have, huh, Enrique?" He was holding a knife, his eyes distraught. "I'll take care of this road, and you're not leaving." I didn't think twice. I forced the door, but it was no use. So I ran to the hallway and went back into room 13. I saw a smaller door at the end, hidden behind a piece of furniture. I went in. It was a dark tunnel, smelling of death and full of victims' belongings. Suddenly, I heard his footsteps following me. I ran, tripping over bags and bones, until I reached an opening that led to a lot behind the motel. The sun was already illuminating the morning, but before I could run away, I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder. Martim had caught up with me and wounded me. By reflex, I turned and hit him with a stone I found on the ground. He fell, but got up. I ran towards the road. A truck passed by, and I honked like crazy. The driver stopped and helped me get in. I told him everything, and he shook his head. It's not the first story I've heard. When the police go, they don't find anything. He took me to the police station, and I gave the diary to the authorities. But when they returned, they found nothing. No Martim, no room 13, no tunnel. Shortly after, I heard about another missing person on the BR-46, someone who was traveling alone. Coincidence? I doubt it. Martim is still there, waiting for his next prey.